and Atomic Attraction. Again, this is a book we've spent a lot of time on, but it's very diverse. It gets into a lot of areas, not just, here's the color shirt you should wear to make girls like you. But it also gets into the last part of the book is more about maintaining relationships. And we will run into some good stuff and some bad stuff. This chapter is Women Always Test. And God, there is so much angst and bitterness on the internet about the fact that women test men. Mm-hmm. Not many guys complain about the ways that men test women, which we certainly do. But yeah, the anger over women testing men is quite palpable, especially on Reddit. And it really is unfair, I would say, because we all test things before we choose to invest in them. We test drive cars before we spend the money on them. If we're looking to adopt a dog, we go to the pound and we have them take it out of the cage so we can play with it a little bit and see what it is that we're getting into. And in this example, I am equating men to dogs, not women to dogs. So lest my complaints about Dr. Glover come back. But it's essential that before you invest your time, effort, emotion, money in something, you make sure it's the right thing that you're choosing, and you do that through testing. Now, one sentence here in the first paragraph of this chapter that I highlighted was, at its core, a test is an easy way for a woman to determine whether a man is weak or strong. I would cross out weak or strong and say, it's an easy way for a woman to determine whether a man is trustworthy. Because if a man advertises himself as weak, if he says, physically, I can't lift any weight, I can't run any distance, and from a perspective of my character, I only do things that are easy, and I never apply myself to do things that are hard or difficult. I just give up. That is if a man comes to the table with that and is completely honest about it, that's the only man that no woman will test. She will take you at your word.
Right.
If you advertise yourself as weak in both what you do and what you say, she'll just be like, okay, I believe you. And then she'll never test you.
Yeah.
And she'll never want to be with you.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay? So I would change it to trustworthy, because most men will advertise themselves through their words, certainly, and possibly their actions, as being strong. Mm-hmm. And so it's only when you bring that to the table, when you sort of try to sell yourself as strong, that is when a woman will test you, not to see if you're strong necessarily, but to see if you're trustworthy. Right. Is this guy what he says he is?
I mean, you've already passed the first test by saying you're strong and not weak, right?
Correct.
The guys who say that they're weak, whatever, come
disqualify themselves
immediately,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. So it's just like, okay, well, actions speak louder than words. We all know that. And that's, I feel, where a lot of women are coming from is, okay, you're saying this, but how do you actually behave, right? Are you just selling me like a used car salesman and saying, hey, all these things, I've got all these things going on, but what people say, what people do are very different.
So, right. Talk is cheap. It's easy to tell someone what you are. It is difficult to show them what you are. And it's very difficult to show them what you are over an extended period and not be truthful about it. Eventually, you spend 90 days, 6 months, a year with somebody. Depending on how often you see them, you will see who they are will come out, because that's one of the things my old minister, when I was growing up, used to tell me. Pressure exposes people for who they really are.
Yeah.
Good times, you can pretend to be anybody you want to during good times.
Yeah.
But, deal with a breakup, a job loss, a terminal or a chronic illness. That's when people will see who you really are, because you can't hide it. You can't focus on the game while you're focusing on staying alive. And so, that's what it comes down to. Now, there is something here in the second paragraph before we get into this insane case study. A test is nature's way of helping a woman find the best genes for her future offspring. If you pass a woman's test, she's more likely to believe you can father strong, healthy children. I find that the way that he characterizes this, I feel like it's a little bit of a veiled reference to the hypergamous nature of women. but I also don't think that it's necessarily accurate. We've learned in this and in other books that the impulse or the drive to avoid pain is stronger than the drive to find pleasure. And so I would say that a woman's testing is not necessarily about finding the highest value man to mate with. It's more about avoiding the life-destroying cost of picking the wrong man to make kids with.
Yeah, I also think that not every woman needs exactly the same thing as every other woman.
Of course.
And
yes.
so therefore, the way she tests a man is going to be different based on her own needs.
Right. Yes, there will be certain things that are probably universal to heterosexual women who have an interest in reproducing, which would be many, if not most of them. But then, yes, things like preference is going to be a factor as you go on a case-by-case basis. And the answer to that is not, as a man, try to be the things that she's looking for, because, as we said, you can keep that up for a little while, but you can't keep it up forever.
Mm-hmm.
The result is to be authentically who you are, work on making who you are the best version of yourself, and then you will be less preoccupied with, oh no, is she testing me? Am I being tested? Why is she trying to test me? If you're just honest all the time about who you are and you're committed to growth and self-improvement, then testing isn't going to be a problem for you. It'll be a benefit because maybe she'll test you in a way that you'll both realize, oh yeah, that's not who I am. And then there you go. You two shouldn't be together.
Yeah. I actually, after reading this chapter, had kind of a thought that it might be a little bit more or less triggering for some men to change the word from testing to communication. So to me, when a woman is quote unquote testing a man, to me, that's just a different form of communication. She is basically communicating, hey, I need to understand your nature, and this is the way I'm communicating with you to understand your nature. And
Right.
I feel if you are not oversensitive to those methods or techniques that she's using to communicate with you, you can communicate back in a way that makes her feel and understand properly. Words aren't enough in these situations.
Right.
So that's one form of communication. The way I'm looking at it is a woman might do or say things to elicit an emotion or an action in you. And that's just another form of communication that she's leading with that you need to respond with in kind in order for her to understand where you are and feel secure that, yes, you are who you say you are, or you are who you are pretending to be. Right.
Yeah. The only issue I have with swapping out the term communication is that I believe the majority of testing that a woman does is unconscious, where communication, I think, has a little bit more of a deliberate connotation to it.
Okay,
where,
fair.
You know, you initiate communication with someone as a matter of will or a choice that you make, where I think most of the testing that happens, I don't believe that most women are even aware of the fact that they're testing. I think they just, it's so imperative that you don't make babies with the wrong man that it's just part of.
I guess it's more for me in my own way of thinking. All right, she's just communicating. She's just trying to get information from me.
Right.
To me, that's what I'm labeling as communication. So how am I communicating back to her
Right. Gotcha.
what information she needs to have? Because if I just say things, that's not enough. I need to communicate in a different way. And so for me, I'm just trying to take the word test out of it, because I feel like that's a very growing up, going into school and things like that, we're tested, by like authoritarian figures. And I feel like it's a trigger word from a person in power. That's kind of right. And I feel like a lot of times, maybe when we use that word, I associate sometimes like this person thinks they're better than I am. Right. Or that they are an authority figure and that I am trying to prove myself to that person. And by taking the word test out of it and going communication, it's not I'm trying to prove myself. It's more of I'm trying to just communicate who I am.
Yeah, man, Yeah, the thing that really clicked with me as you were just talking about that was I was thinking back to when I was in school, and I love test days.
You freak.
Because I could usually do well on the tests without having to study.
Oh, that's nice.
And so it's interesting. It's like being tested is a far, far lower stress situation for me.
Interesting.
Than a phrase like doing the work.
Oh,
because that reminds me of homework, which I never did and never enjoyed doing, and was always I would always procrastinate and be nervous about homework.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like doing the work of the relationship that fills me with anxiety.
Okay, so I'm not talking
or even
about
doing the work in therapy.
Okay.
Like those are the little bit of homework on a recurring normal basis that you're required to do in life.
Yeah.
That stresses me out. Where the big test, like the SAT or the standardized test or the final exam, no problem. Cool as a cucumber. Don't mind those at all.
Yeah. So I wasn't actually going that far to say that it's doing the work.
No, I was just throwing that out there
Yeah.
as sort of contrasting it with,
I see what
because those are the two things you do in school. You
Yeah.
either you do
I didn't like
homework
doing the work
and
either.
you do tests.
I hated the work and I hated the test. I hated both of those things. Yeah.
I found the testing
Okay.
was a relief to me. It's like, okay, test day's here.
Wow.
And I would usually approach it with the attitude of, I'm smarter than this teacher. They're going to communicate stuff in the question that will tell me what the answer is without me having to even know it.
Mm.
And for the most part, I found that to be true. I would do none of the homework. I would ace all the tests, and I would skate by with a C, because that's what us underachievers do.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you were like acing these things and not doing the work.
I was pretty much acing the tests and just not.
Because you didn't do the
I
homework.
wouldn't turn the homework in at all.
Oh,
and I'd get zeros.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I would. I mean, sometimes I would do enough of it to skate by with a D or a C, but the tests I could ace, and so I would be like a C student essentially by being good at tests. I could also do papers. If it was a class where it was like, we're going to tell you what the paper is going to be about at the beginning of the semester, I would just, in the first 2 weeks, I'd hurry up and do the paper.
You were the exact opposite of me, and I'd stay up the night before.
Oh yeah, not me.
Freaking hated doing papers.
I would do
usually turn it in late anyway.
I would do a paper on a topic that I had never even been taught about.
Wow.
I would read while at the beginning of the class, because this is one of the ways I do think that I'm ADHD, is I would be interested in the class in the first few weeks, and then I would be not interested in the class at all. So it was funny in my college experience. Both of the schools that I attended would have mini-mesters during the summer, where it was like a 6 or an 8 week semester instead of a 15-week semester.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I took a mini-mester, I got an A on the course.
Wow.
Every single time. I never got less than an A. And every time I took a full-length 15-week, it was a struggle for me to pass the class, because I would hit the ground running so hard and be so interested in the material. I would read the textbook like the first 2 weeks of class, cover to cover.
Wow.
And then I would just never have any interest in going to class or doing the homework or anything like that. So when it came to papers, yeah, I would just read the book and then go to the library, do the research paper, and then just kind of sit on it until the end of the semester.
I wish I had been like halfway to where you were with that. The last minute stuff killed me. It totally stressed me out, and I never learned my lesson. I never decided I'm going to do it, even when they assigned it or did it on time. And yeah, I just
I had
just thought it would go away somehow.
I had a very interesting and uniquely difficult time in school because of that. I would be so interested at the beginning, and then it would kind of just fall off. And I'm proud to say I've brought some of that into relationships, and it's worked just as well. Except there's no C's in relationships; those are pass fail. Okay, so let's talk about the wild and wacky case study. Jason and Amy were celebrating their 1-year anniversary. They both ordered a couple of drinks, a daiquiri and a pina colada, which I'm not going to fault them for their choices. I would like to know what flavor daiquiri it was. They both take a drink of their drinks. Jason's pina colada was delightful and Amy's daiquiri was terrible. And so she didn't like it. And he offered her a sip of the pina colada and she liked it and decided to keep it. And then he tried the daiquiri and concurred with her that it was not very tasty. Again, I want to know if it's a banana daiquiri. So he didn't drink it because it was gross. She didn't drink it because it was gross.
Yeah.
It just sat on the table for an hour. Why neither of them said to the waiter, "Hey, make me a new daiquiri. This one's terrible," is a very convenient fact for Christopher Canwell's insane case studies.
Yeah.
Because that's what a grown-up does. Like, oh, this drink's not good.
Well,
bring me a fresh one.
We know the people that are in his case studies are not grown-ups.
No. And again, he's made up all these people. And so he's chosen to make them not grown-ups because he's tried to prove a point. So he doesn't drink it. She doesn't drink it. She dares him to drink it and says that if he does drink it, then she'll give him the best sex of his life. And so he drinks down the whole nasty drink. Instead of saying, there's so much opportunity here to handle this in a calm and cool way, and he doesn't do it. Like, my first thing would be like, okay, hold on. So you're telling me that if I drink my whole drink, if I finish the whole thing, you're going to give me the best sex of my life?
And invite the basketball team.
Yes. Yeah, you took me off my story.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
For no good reason.
Oh my God. I couldn't resist.
And then she confirms, yes, if you drink your whole drink, I will give you the best sex of your life. At that point, waiter, this daiquiri's terrible. Bring me a second pina colada. And then you enjoy your drink and then you hold her to the deal. Okay. So that's the first place where he went wrong. Is he drank a nasty drink for the promise of future sex with a girl he's been seeing for a year?
Yeah, that's right. Something's really unhealthy in your relationship if you're begging for sex after a year.
Yeah, or begging for good sex.
Yeah, no.
I mean, or the best sex. I mean,
right.
Number one, I mean, one person cannot offer another person the best sex of their life. The best sex of your life is something that you do with your partner, not for your partner. And so,
interesting dynamic. Yep.
Yeah, this is, again, it's freaking silly. Okay, so basically, he finishes the drink, then they get home or whatever, they get into bed, and she's too drunk to want to have sex. And then he's like, "You're not drunk, you had one drink." And she's like, "I'm tired." And then basically, whatever the reason is, whether he failed the test at dinner for the drink and she was just trying to see if he would drink a nasty drink to screw with him, or she just wasn't in the mood for whatever other reason, he loses his mind and basically keeps begging her for sex. And she's like, "No, I'm not into it. You ruined it." Mm-hmm. And then the next morning, I guess he was counting on sex with her in the morning since she was too drunk or tired or whatever. And she didn't give him any of that. She got dressed to go have lunch with her sister. And then he texts her the following day, "Hey, how was lunch?" She doesn't respond. He starts freaking out, getting worried, starts blowing up her phone with more texts and more calls. She never responds to him. And then, eventually that's the end of the relationship. Again, this is just so much nonsense and such a poor example of testing and such a childish example of both of them behaving like maniacs. The bottom line is, don't trade things you don't like for things that you might like, because that's operating from a position of scarcity. Yeah. Like, treating her like anniversary sex is something that you need to make a deal for. Right. It's like,
that he's not enough on his own to have sex with her, that he needs to do these parlor tricks in addition to who he is in this relationship after a year in order to earn sex from her. There's something seriously wrong in that type of relationship. The power dynamic is damaged at that point. There's something underlying that needs to be talked about, because it's clear that she doesn't either respect him or is concerned about him. Because again, to me, I'm not looking at this as a test, as more of a communication, because she pulls away. Not only is she saying, hey, dance for me, monkey, kind of thing, right? By doing something disgusting. That's something as a big brother I would do to my little sister. Would basically, like, we were down, this reminds me of being downstairs or the bar or whatever.
Frat brothers.
And a frat brothers, right. And it's just,
you dare somebody to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah, and there's all these like old bottles of everything or whatever. And
right.
we would torture my sister, trying to, tease her into drinking this stuff, and she never would. But at the same time, it's just like, that's not something you do with somebody you love. And it was also by the fact is that she wasn't responding back to his texts the next day and responding or the day after that. That shows she's pulling away. So that means that there's something that.
Yeah, or she's just busy, or her phone died. I mean, we don't know why she didn't.
Right. Regardless.
Right.
The message that I got from this in this fake scenario is that the guy really didn't have control over his own emotions or value himself enough. Instead, it sounds like just wherever they were in that relationship, he was just coming on too strong. And, I look at that as her communicating in a way saying, hey, I need a break. Give me some time here. And I feel like that's the right response from this guy would have been not blowing up her phone, not, trying to make these deals and bargaining to have sex with her. But, taking a step back, and if you've got, again, we always talk about building a cake of a life and having things to do. If you have other things that are pleasurable in your life other than this relationship, it should be easy for you to find something that's enjoyable for you to do, kind of help take your mind off of things.
Yeah. And I would say, I've been in relationships that had the dynamic of I didn't want to have sex as much as my partner did, or my partner didn't want to have sex as much as I did. Mm-hmm. And in every case, there's something else going on that is leading to that. It's not just sex is not isolated. And in this case, I mean, I feel like both partners really did reinforce the somewhat harmful trope of men love sex, women hate sex, and they just tolerate it.
Right.
And
that's
not the way it ever works in a healthy relationship. It's humans who are healthy, obviously with some possible caveats as far as asexuality or what things I don't understand very well that I'm not going to speak on. But for the most part, most of us who pursue romantic sexual relationships with partners, when we are happy and safe and are mostly emotionally attracted, physically, yes, but especially emotionally attracted to our partner, we're going to want to have sex with them, whether we're male, female, gay, straight, whatever.
Yeah.
And so in this case, just the idea of, jump through this hoop and I'll give you the best sex of your life. It's like, no, I'm not going to drink this drink. And I got some stuff planned for you, and we are going to have the best sex of our lives tonight. And just this thing where one person is chasing and the other person is running is not a healthy dynamic when it comes to sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
there's a disconnect.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many more profound truths to glean out of this case study than what the author intended. And that feels like a bummer and a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Welcome back, Dan.
Thanks, Charles. I appreciate the interruption.
No problem. We had to take a quick break in our recording of this episode because you had a scheduled conference call, and I BS'd with you for too long before we started recording that I ate up our recording time.
That's okay.
And
I thought it was good content.
Thank you. I did have a lot to share that maybe someday I'll have the courage to talk about everything like that on the podcast, but it's not this day, as Aragorn would say.
Something to work towards, right? We need something to wake us up.
Okay, so we're going to start getting into the different kinds of tests that men might be confronted with in their relationships. And one of the sort of the intro to the different levels of testing, which even the names of these are offensive. The piece of advice that he shares at the beginning is the moment you sense a woman pulling away by either acting disinterested or not responding to your text or calls quickly or not responding to your text or calls at all, then, and this is not going to be anything different. It says you should assume that she's testing you. it doesn't matter whether she's testing you or whether she's busy or whether her phone died. You just don't blow up her phone and start trying to chase her down to get a response.
Right.
Whether she's testing you or one of those other things I said, she's got a family emergency, she's got a work emergency, she's cheating on you. None of it matters. It does not matter what the core reason is that she's not meeting your probably unspoken expectations for how quickly she gets back to you.
Yeah.
Just leave her alone until she gets back to you. And then, if you want to ask her a question about what was going on, why she wasn't responding, if you want to say, hey, the fact that we haven't talked in a week for what seems like no reason is an issue for me, let's get into it, then you can do that. But in the moment when your emotions are triggered and you're ramped up, just leave her alone and you'll hear from her eventually, or you won't, but either way, you'll be okay.
Yep.
I doubt your wife or your girlfriend of a year is going to just stop talking to you for no reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's get into the kinds of tests. The first one is very eloquently titled the bitch test, which, I would almost rephrase this, or not rephrase it, but recontextualize it as the bitch test is not about the woman in your life being a bitch. It's about the woman in your life testing you to see if you're the bitch.
Yeah.
And in this case, the woman is doing it through rude or insulting or disrespectful behavior. And what the author is recommending is that you do not respond to this with anger or with emotion or with ramping up the situation. You just calmly walk away. I would encourage you to not just walk away, but identify why you're walking away and say, look, I'm not feeling what's going on right now. And I don't care to respond to it in the way that you're coming at me. So I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take a break and we can discuss what we're both feeling later on.
Yeah.
I think he would say all he says is it's better, instead of giving into temptation and exploding in rage, it's better to keep a cool head and walk away.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is an opportunity for instruction here, and there's an opportunity for strength and vulnerability to say, I'm not into what's going on right now. I don't like what you said to me. I don't want to be spoken to that way. So I'm going to remove myself from the situation and we can have a conversation about this later.
Yeah, it's stating your boundaries and enforcing them. I think that's a big thing that a lot of us have difficulty doing, as I've had difficulty speaking that word. So yeah, I'm absolutely guilty of that as well. It's not an easy conversation because a lot of times when the emotion's already high, at least from one person, right, the last thing you want to do is amp them up. And sometimes it's difficult to be okay saying something that potentially might throw a little fuel on the fire.
Yes, I would say that. Yeah, and remember that people set boundaries not as punishment and not as justifications for breakups. People set boundaries because they're interested in maintaining the relationship.
Yeah.
When somebody does something to you that you consider to be unforgivable and you don't want to be with them anymore, when you say, hey, you treated me this way, it's not okay, we're done, that's not really setting a boundary. Setting a boundary is saying, I care about this relationship, I want it to go on, and so I can't participate just for my half, I can't participate in this kind of behavior. When you treat me this way, I have to respond to it this other way so that we can maintain our relationship. And
I think an important part of setting those boundaries is you do it ahead of time. You communicate that before the boundary is violated. Yes. I know you can't possibly think of every scenario. Right. However, there should be some certain things that need to be talked about before you go to the extreme of saying, all right, I'm out, with a few exceptions, obviously.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, it is better to
murdering your parents might be one of them. Correct. Something like those.
Or maybe lines, for some of us that would be a favor. I don't know. Maybe that would be the sweetest act of service ever. I don't want to pay with too broad of a brush.
Yeah, but murder is not in my love languages for receiving. Just let's put that out there.
We're two different people, Dan.
Yeah. That's why this dynamic works.
The old Libra Scorpio Enneagram 9, Enneagram 8 pairing. Yeah, so I would say that, because you don't know exactly everything that somebody could do that would violate your boundaries, that's why, taking a walk is such a valuable tool, because it's very easy to say, oops, I just noticed I have an issue with what happened here, but I haven't stated it as a boundary. So I need to figure out how to do that. So that's why I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a walk, and then I'm going to come back and say, hey, I've got a boundary around this. I know neither of us knew that I had a boundary over this issue. We haven't talked about it before, but now I've got to say, okay, what you just engaged in is behavior that I can't tolerate. And so let's talk about how, when you're feeling what you're feeling and I'm feeling what I'm feeling, we can approach this in a way that doesn't violate either of our boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, I had an ex-girlfriend who I fought with way too much, and verbally, and she would always say her therapist.
Welcome to the club. We should have buttons.
Yeah. She would always say her therapist would tell her not to make decisions, or we shouldn't make decisions in the middle of an argument. And I always was just like, yeah, what does she know? And I was just like, I'm like, I want out, but I didn't mean it at the time. And I didn't have the wisdom back then to, I wasn't into this personal development stuff, and I just didn't have the wisdom to listen, but it was smart advice. It was, you don't want to, your primitive brain takes over at that point,
right?
And when your emotions are running high. And so it's very difficult to overcome that and make intelligent decisions with the more, modern part of our brain, the more evolved part of our brain, which is where we really should be making these decisions from. So walking away, getting rid of that anxiety and lowering those emotions gives the front part of your brain a little bit more space to operate and be able to make those proper decisions.
Yeah, and this is, look, I'll be honest, this part of it, and anytime I'm encouraging our listeners or you to take that break and walk away, it's a bit of do as I say, don't do as I do, because it is a huge...
Do as you did. Let's put it in the past tense.
Okay.
Because you're going to do that from now. Yeah, you're working on it, right?
Yeah, because it is definitely, it's easy to say when I'm sitting across from you recording a podcast, but when you're in that moment...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
...of, the amygdala is getting activated and you're trying to think with your prefrontal cortex, and you've got the voice in your head saying, oh no, when people take a break, they leave and never come back. And because that's what my experience was as a kid. It's like when I'm just taking a break, then, with a couple years from then you got a different set of parents than the ones you had originally.
Yeah.
And that is hard. That's a hard voice to silence when it was so loud when you were 4 or 5 years old. It's never going to be gone from me. It's always going to be in the back of my head.
Yep.
And every fight that I have with someone who I don't want to be fighting with in the first place is going to be like, the front part of my brain is going to say, we should take a break right now. And the back part of my brain is going to say, if you let them go, you're never going to see them again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my cross to bear. And thankfully, great books like Atomic Attraction are inspiring me to think about it in ways the author does not intend.
Interesting. All right, he's getting some value, or you're getting some value.
I am definitely mining this book for what I can use, and hopefully that's getting spread to some of our listeners too. Let's talk about the jealousy test. So the jealousy test is when your partner will do something as innocent and probably unconscious as referencing some really funny joke that their coworker Steve told, and he's so funny, he's so good at telling stories, or the fact that it could be something more dramatic. You go to the bathroom and come back, and then your girlfriend or wife is talking to some guy at the bar that you have no idea who it is. Mm-hmm. Either way, the instinct that most of us men have when that happens is to do something called mate guarding, where we eventually want to signal to ourselves, to her, and to everybody else in the place that we are that, no, she's my property. And that is an unhealthy impulse, and it doesn't lead to anything good. The way that should be handled is, and the author says, with indifference or humor. But I would say not with feigned indifference or humor. You should actually be indifferent, and you should find it funny. Because, number one, you should feel some measure of pride that you're with someone that the opposite sex or the same sex has interest in. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to be with, nobody wants to be with somebody that nobody else wants.
Yep.
And so you should feel good about that, not bad about that. You should be on your guard for inappropriate behavior, but it doesn't take inappropriate behavior to set off the mate guardian impulse that most of us have.
Yeah.
It takes very appropriate behavior in many cases to still get you like, uh-oh, this feels like a threat of some level.
And I think something to keep in mind here is that if the twinge of the jealousy comes up, I think it's important to not feel bad about that, right? It's what you do with those feelings and how you communicate from that point forward.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
You're not going to be able to quickly, at some point, maybe you might be able to diminish those emotions or those reactions a little bit over time, but it's not something you can do overnight, and definitely not with the, your prefrontal cortex and calming everything down. That's just not the way it works. So it's more about, all right, how do you handle that? And so for me, another way to think about the approach would be come with curiosity too. So ask questions, and try not to do it in a sarcastic or emotionally laden tone when you're asking the questions, but be curious. Oh, what was that joke about? Or does Steve have any other funny jokes? Or does he do any stand up? Just like ask questions and just get more information. And I think part of and I think I remember seeing something, reading something at some point, when you start asking questions or you ask questions of somebody, you activate a different part of your brain that actually takes some emotion out of the situation.
Yes,
so I think it probably would work for you as well, kind of reduce your emotions, coming with curiosity.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned curiosity. I actually had the thought, I think it was yesterday as I was coming home from work about, I watched an interesting reel about, with the definitions of what many of us, especially, Gen X and older, what we've grown used to as far as words like sex and gender, and learning that, like all words in languages change over time, and that's trying to deny that is kind of silly. And I also enjoy when people say that word's made up, and then the response, I believe, from Thor in one of the Thor movies was, all words are made up. Because they are. Mm-hmm. As a society, we assign meanings to noises we make with our mouths and squiggles we put down on paper.
Right.
And we all agree with what they mean until we don't all agree with what they mean, and then they start meaning different things.
Yep.
And I don't see that. I'm not threatened by that. Okay, I am threatened by that, but I shouldn't be threatened by that at the level where it impacts my ability to be empathetic and understanding and curious to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the thought yesterday. So anyway, I was watching a reel where somebody basically said, okay, if terms of gender and sex, they don't mean the same things that they meant when I was a kid in school learning about them. What does it mean now? What does masculinity mean? What does femininity mean? In your opinion, what do you think it means? And this is by a pretty thoughtful guy who's got an Instagram that I follow, and he talks a lot about relationships and about social issues and things like that. And he basically said masculinity is the behaviors that we currently come to expect from men and boys, and femininity are the behaviors that we currently have come to expect from women and girls. Mm-hmm. And that can change and does change, like the idea of the kind of clothes that men wear. Like as a country and as a society, there's a significant portion of us who identify as traditional men that kind of identify the clothing and the hairstyles of the 1950s. That's masculinity.
Right.
And anything that came before that or after that, that's not masculinity. Mm-hmm, and so we tend to get kind of caught up on that. And same thing with the gender roles of women and females. And we do the same thing. It's like we sort of center on this one moment in time where we think things were the way they were supposed to be, whatever that means. And then that's what we accept as the way things are supposed to be forever. But I was thinking and one of the things we positively, in my opinion, associate with masculinity are things like ambition, delayed gratification, strength under duress, just positive traits that of people not just men, but people who are willing to do the hard thing for the greater good of themselves and the people they care about. That is one of the things I associate with masculinity. And another thing that I've begun to associate with masculinity is curiosity, getting back to what you were saying, where what is it about curiosity that I think makes it perhaps the most important mark of fitness in a person? And I was thinking about it in terms of contentious social issues. We did that episode a while ago about woke words that scare men, and things that as a man you could hear, specifically as a white middle-aged man like we both are, that could, you know, put you a little bit on the defensive and wonder, okay, what are you, when you use this word, what is it that you're saying about me? How are you judging me? How are you telling me that I'm not good enough, or I'm not, I don't have the right outlook, or I don't believe the right things? And so anyway, that gets it to, if someone were to say something about your country's history of colonization, or your gender's history of ruling by patriarchal standards, or your race's history of supremacy, the correct, and I think the healthiest and the most effective reaction to all those things is curiosity. Like, what is it that you mean by those words? Tell me more. I'm interested. Tell me where you think that people like me, or me specifically, has fallen short of those things in the past. Like, because through curiosity, through asking questions, you are learning more about the environment you currently live in, not the environment you wish you lived in, not that your perspective on the world as you think it ought to be, but you're getting perspective on what the world that you live in actually is. And the more knowledge you have about the world you actually live in, the more fit you are to survive and thrive in that world.
Absolutely. It goes back to Stephen Covey's seek to understand before you seek to be understood, right?
Yes. And
so
that
takes more information, and
yes,
you need to be curious to get that information,
because
seeking to understand.
Yes, and if you do find yourself drawn to traditional masculine roles of, you know, in your family, being a teacher, being a provider, being a protector, then you need to understand the times and the world that you're living in with as much information as possible, so that you can do those things that you find to be important values.
Yeah. I mean, it's the skill set of being able to adapt. Right?
Yes. Adaptability is really
that's how organisms survive. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And as organisms, we're really the only ones that have that ability to say, okay, I could choose to be defensive now. I could choose to feel accused of something, or I could choose to say, your perspective is valuable and interesting to me, and I want to know more about it. So tell me more. Tell me more about how you think this group of people has behaved poorly. Tell me how you think I may have missed opportunities to do the right thing. I want to hear more. I want to understand more.
And I think the other part of that makes it an easier thing to do is to also not be tied to right or wrong, that this person is right, or that you are right,
that's so hard,
or that they are wrong, or that you are wrong.
Yes.
Right. And you have the decision, you have the ability to decide after you have that information, again, kind of like this book, what you want to leave and what you want to incorporate or take away from that. And I feel that's the elements of being able to adapt. Right at that point. And you are still, the reason I like that is you are still in control. You are still deciding for yourself. You are not just rolling over and going, hey, my information, my values, my opinion doesn't matter. But at the same time, you're also not in this delusional place where you think that you are flawless, perfect, and right all the time either. And that takes a little humility and a little life of experience, I think, as well, because that's gotten easier for me as I've gotten older.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I'm so bummed out by what I perceive to be the transition of Dr. Jordan Peterson from somebody who started his public life, at least, as somebody that was sharing some real valuable information, and then has kind of suffered from what we call, and we referenced on this podcast before, audience capture, where we would be in a threat for the same thing if we ever got big and successful at our podcast, which is this idea of your audience is coming to you with expectations of what they want to hear from you. And the way that you secure your financial future is by giving the people what they want. And I feel like Dr. Peterson has got himself into that position where he's telling a certain segment of the population, which does trend to be male and trend to be on the right side of the political spectrum. He's repeating the things they want to hear instead of focusing on things like in the book that we reviewed, where he would say, go into every conversation assuming the person that has the opposite opinion that you do understands something that you don't yet understand. And
Yeah.
it's like that stuff does, when you have to sell TV shows and podcasts and books to people that they're already coming to the table with a bunch of values and a bunch of opinions, and you want them to keep buying your stuff, positions like always assume that the opposition knows something that you don't yet understand. It kind of gets lost. And I think that's a shame that, where again, I will toot Sam Harris's horn whenever I can, because he is very open on his podcast about the fact that pretty much anything I say, half my audience is going to hate me.
Yeah. And I think, but at the same time, I feel, I guess the question is, is Peterson doing that because he really doesn't believe in what he's saying, all those things, or is he leaving out the other parts that might go against what his main audience is saying? It's hard to believe that. Maybe I'm just coming from a wrong angle. Again, I'm making an assumption here is that, if we were to get really big, we'd say whatever we felt and believed, and then let the cards fall where they may in terms of who agrees with that or not. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I like to think we would, and I hope that we would.
Yeah.
But
look, it's just easier. I feel like it's also like being a nice guy kind of thing. You're pretending to be something that you're not, right? And it's just I feel like it's kind of along those lines.
Exactly, if
like
you
go down that road versus just going, this is what we believe. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. All right, we'll see you later. You're not one of our 1,000 raving fans.
Yeah, and part of that is, keeping a handle on your lifestyle and your expectations and what it is that makes you feel good. Look, I'm sure there is some level of success that I could achieve where buying $5,000 cars and $60 coach seats on Spirit would no longer appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know that I think I've gotten to the point now where I'm old enough and happy enough that I'm not chasing a lifestyle to be happy. I don't know that staying at the Plaza after I've chartered a private jet to New York would make me so much happier than a $60 Spirit flight in a hostel that there's not much I would be willing to compromise to get that other life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like things are good as they are. And I don't know that I would muzzle myself and not say what I want to say to get that other thing. I'm sure those other things are great. And I've been on expensive vacations and I've been, I've sat in first class before, but, a free glass of orange juice before the flight does not feel as good as putting your head on the pillow knowing you said exactly what you believed all day, every day.
I'm going to challenge you and say that why can't you have both? Like the option, right? I believe, you can say what you want to say and still achieve, if you want the financial wealth, if you want that type of lifestyle, I think you can do it and still be true to yourself. I don't think it's an either or. I think one way might be faster. My belief, and I'm making assumptions here. My belief is that what you just said, I think it would be faster if you basically niched down and kind of sold out a little bit. It could be faster, but I'm challenging my own beliefs recently with something that I'm listening to called prosperity consciousness, actually. And he's got an interesting perspective that he kind of walks you through. Even if you had $1 million, if you needed to spend $1,000 a day on yourself, could you do it? First couple of days, maybe after a week, but could you do it every single day for a year? those people, they make $365,000 a year. Many people make much more than that.
Sure.
Right. So he's like, listen, a lot of time, and he kind of tries to helps you identify, you've got these other blocks going on in your mind in terms of, do you really need that much money? Is that something that would make you happy? And if not, there could be reasons why you might be sabotaging yourself in certain areas where you're trying to like earn some of this $1 million a year kind of thing.
Right.
Because you don't have a need for it, or you've got some preconceived notions that are blocking you, such as people with money are unhappy. That might be one of them that we all kind of live with, right? Rich people aren't happy, or rich people are bad. They do bad things. And he just kind of helps you uncover some of that stuff. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's a conversation worth having, but the idea of, and we'll bring it back to, again, just approaching life, even approaching things, whether it's on a societal level, political level, or in your personal relationship, things that feel like an accusation. Another thing that I learned this week from, there's a great account I follow on Instagram that I'll share in the notes. She's a relationship coach, and she shared that not all pain is somebody's fault.
Okay.
Meaning, you and your partner, you and your friend, something could happen in your relationship where one of you feels bad about it, and it needs to be discussed, addressed, repaired in some way without it being anybody's fault. Like, you don't have to drill down every time to somebody's underlying intentions and get to the point where you agree that you did this thing to hurt me. No, I didn't. I didn't think it was going to hurt you at all. And that was a big thing in my last relationship, on focusing on the impact of actions versus the intention of actions. And intention matters, but impact also matters. And Sam Harris, in his analogy or his metaphor, explained it where there's a big difference between stabbing your wife and the two of you are in the kitchen cooking, and you turn around with a knife in your hand and it accidentally goes into your partner.
Yeah.
The impact is the same. Somebody's going to the hospital and somebody's going to be in a lot of pain, but the intention is where you can use that to determine, okay, well, what's going to happen next? Once we get through this emergency, what's going to happen next time? As somebody who is defensive, my impulse would be, let's minimize the impact and focus on my good intentions. And as somebody who might be, a partner who may be more sensitive or more likely to be hurt by something I say or do, I would say they could have the opposite thing, which is let's focus a little more on the impact and not on the intention. And there's a balance to be had there. But bottom line is, sometimes people get hurt and it's not another person's fault. It's just a thing that happened, and you can address it based on, hey, things accidentally happen, people get hurt, and we can work through that and not focus on now the criminal investigation of whose fault this is has to happen. It's either you're too sensitive or I'm too much of an asshole. We got to get to the bottom of which is true. And it could be neither of those things. And is often probably neither of those things. Yeah. But again, when that goddamn amygdala starts firing off and shuts the prefrontal cortex down, that's when we have to remember these things and keep them in mind. Okay, so digression over mostly.
For now,
the reason that we I will say this about the jealousy thing. The way to counteract and insulate yourself from the emotions and the concerns of a jealousy test from a woman is invest in yourself and be the kind of person that you respect and you're proud of and you consider as attractive. And you will be far, far less concerned about her finding somebody else. I've said before, no partner, no woman, no wife, no girlfriend has ever been stolen. They've only been lost. Yeah.
And, I think part of that comes down to, I really believe we should all be, from both men and women, our perspective. And same thing, with our friendships, in relationships that we want to be in and that we don't need to be in.
Yes.
And I feel like if you have and you operate, if you've got the mindset and you operate in a way such as, this is something that I want, this is something I appreciate, this is something I enjoy, and not something that I need, it's a lot less triggering when the risk of losing that other person comes to light. And I feel like in those jealousy situations you're talking about, that's a little bit of what goes on. That mate guarding is, I'm afraid to lose what I've got because I'm afraid of what's going to happen to either me, my emotions, my life, whatever that is, if that other person goes away. And I don't think that's again, I feel like there's some deeper issues that need to be worked on if you are operating in that type of mindset.
And I've
been there.
I have frequently operated in that kind of mindset. And what I'm learning through some of the books, that I've read recently and some of the work I've done in my men's group is, as a child who dealt with abandonment issues, the thing to remember as an adult, hopefully a healthy adult who's working toward being healthy and happy and safe, is that I am now in a position as a 45-year-old man where I can never be abandoned by anyone, because I've got me in my corner now, who is a healthy, compassionate adult, and I will treat myself that way. And so now, no matter who comes or goes in my life, I'm doing the work that I need to do to look out for me and keep me healthy, so I can accept new people into my life and I can lose people into my life, and I'll be all right. Like,
it doesn't mean it's not going to be painful. It doesn't mean it's not going to suck.
Yes.
But you will survive, and you need to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've survived it so far.
Mm-hmm.
I've survived it in way more vulnerable conditions than I am in today, and I still made it through back then.
Great point.
So I can certainly make it through now.
Great point.
And so that's what keeps one from pushing everybody off to a distance, and hopefully that's what keeps one from driving people away who are in your life by trying to manage them instead of just love them.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So, but again, I will say that investing in yourself, and for me, that means things like my meditation practice, my journaling, taking walks, going to the gym, going on trips, doing long hikes. When I do those things, I feel like I am not going to lose a bake-off with another man for the woman that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I don't do those things, when I neglect those things, when I'm in a relationship and I'm spending too much time sitting on her couch watching TV instead of doing the things I need to do for my own health, that's when that insecurity starts creeping in for me, and I start worrying about those things at a level that I shouldn't.
And we have to also remember that especially women, I feel, are much more perceptive than men on the whole. I'm going to stereotype here, but I think they are, and they're going to pick up on that insecurity too. Those things that you're talking about in terms of, spending so much time with them, texting them all the time, or spending, on the couch and just,
or mate guarding, having a meltdown when you come back from the bathroom and she's talking to a guy.
Right. It's obvious to us as men, and to me, I feel like, women, it's probably screaming billboards of, hey, this guy is not secure in himself. He is not. And that's the last thing somebody else wants in their life, is to have to take care of somebody else. Right. And when you're screaming that insecurity, it means I need instead of I'm able to give. And I don't feel like, it's a different dynamic. If it's a mother-child or a father-child, there's a need and give and responsibility there. Absolutely. But we need to, as human beings, realize that there is no unconditional love between two partners. That doesn't exist. No. That is something that you earn, and it's something you need to maintain. And it means it's work. Unfortunately, it's not like, you're my girlfriend now. Oh, I can just kick back and,
And taking it back to the beginning,
not do anything.
Like we said, about the guy who honestly advertises his weakness and his frailty. When you're in a situation, and jealousy will happen to you even when she's not testing. Yeah. Unconsciously, consciously, she's not testing at all. She's just interacting with someone, and it could trigger jealousy in you. But what you have to worry about is, what is that communicating to her?
Mm-hmm.
She could have this innocent interaction with this guy with no interest or attraction to him whatsoever. But by you freaking out about it, that plants the seed in her mind of, okay, wait a second. He's worried about this. Is my coworker Steve better than my boyfriend?
Or if nothing else, is this guy can't handle reality. Like, I need to interact with men because I live on the planet. Sorry. So yeah, I live on the planet and I need to interact with both men and women and do things that are a part of normal life. He can't handle me being part of normal life. That's not healthy.
Yes. I want to finish this chapter on one last thing. And I thought a fun way to do this would be, he gives several strategies here on how to pass every test that a woman gives you. And I've got some strong opinions on his recommendations. So why don't you read these one at a time?
Yeah.
And I will chime in and yell and scream when I hear something I don't like.
All right. To project strength and confidence is useful to keep the following guidelines in mind. 1, don't try to control her.
Absolutely. Agree with that 100%. Do not try to control your partner.
2, never beg, plead, or cry.
Okay. Never beg, never plead, but I will not agree to never cry. There are situations when it's appropriate to cry, and yeah, I am not going to try to convince men that it's never okay to cry, never okay to cry in front of your partner, your therapist, your best friend. There are times when it's okay. And if you have saddled up with a friend, partner, or therapist that can't hold space for the fact that you might need to cry, then go find a better one.
Yep.
So begging and pleading, no, don't beg and plead anybody for anything. But crying, I am not going to across the board say don't cry.
Never ask for forgiveness.
Also bullshit. Listen, when you participate in behavior that falls short of your values, again, if you were the last person on earth and you did something that you didn't think was okay, you should ask yourself for forgiveness. If someone else saw you behave that way and was impacted by you behaving that way, you should ask them for forgiveness too. So this idea of never ask your partner for forgiveness is bullshit.
I agree. Never become aggressive.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because if you become aggressive, that is communicating that you're not in control of yourself.
100%. Avoid showing signs of jealousy.
Yes, 100%. Agree with that. Again, build yourself into the kind of a man that doesn't lose bake-offs.
Never make a woman your top priority.
I would agree with that, because never make anything your top priority except for your own health, mental, physical health. That's number one above everything else.
Don't try to reason, explain, and apologize.
Okay, so I would say when you're having a fight with a partner, particularly if it's a woman, what were the first two? Reason,
explain, and apologize.
Okay, yeah. Reasoning your way out of a conflict is not going to result in a victory, and is probably not going to. Your partner should be able to understand where you're coming from and what you were thinking at the time that you did something that bothered them. So reasoning and explaining is a way to share with someone who you are and how you work. It's not a way to get them off of the thing they believe or the reason that they're upset.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was
apologize.
You should apologize when you've done something wrong, either through your intention or through the impact it had on. When something goes away that you wish it didn't go, it's okay to say, I'm sorry things went this way. I'm sorry I acted this way. I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry for you that this happened. I mean, there's a ton of ways that you can apologize. And I think the man who always apologizes and the man who never apologizes are displaying the same weakness of a different color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Don't chase her with messages and phone calls.
I agree 100% that, and chasing is the operative word here. When you want to talk to somebody, talk to them, initiate communication. When they have communicated to you that they need space or they're busy or something, just believe them and believe that you're worthy of them coming to you when they're ready to have a conversation.
And part of that communication is meaning no response, no communication back to you. That is communicating something still, right?
That's true. And it's not communicating that you're worthless. It's not communicating that you're a bad guy. It's communicating that their interest in a dialogue with you right now is too low for them to talk to you.
Yep.
And that's okay. They're allowed to have that, whether it's a brand new person that you've just met or your partner for multiple years. If they just don't have interest in speaking to you right now, they're allowed to feel that way.
And that kind of goes along with the next one. If she withdraws her attention, never chase her.
It goes right along with that. And I would say, yes, you're not going to convince someone to give you more attention. There's nothing you can say that will talk them into giving you more attention.
Take the focus off the woman and focus on yourself instead.
again, I think that contributes to what your priority is in life. If your priority in life is your mental and physical health and being, the healthiest, best man you can be, then that is where your priority should be. Build the healthiest life you can, and the women, children, other men in your life will benefit from that.
Deflect rude, disrespectful behavior with humor and indifference.
And that's across the board with anybody in a professional or personal setting. If somebody reacts to something you've done or proactively decides to be rude or disrespectful, do not let it change your attitude or change your state.
Act like a robot and remain indifferent to her emotions and moods.
I disagree with this one. Do not act like a robot. There's a big difference between letting someone's bad mood put you in a bad mood,
right,
and being indifferent. I would say, yeah, if someone's upset about something or in a bad mood or sad or crying, you don't need to mirror their emotions as he previously said, meaning something. You don't need to let their state take over your state, because that's codependence. But what you don't need to be indifferent either. Yep. You can be concerned about what they're going through. You can be kind about what they're going through, but don't let it turn your state into their state.
Yep. That's a better way of putting it for sure.
You pretty much on the same page with me on these?
Absolutely.
Okay. I wish the author was. I wish I didn't have to feel the need to correct someone who's
most of it's highlighted that you did agree with.
Yes, correct.
So, maybe 90% there, 85%, something like that. So
but
it's not, which is more than usual for one of these chapters.
But the things we disagree with are pretty big.
Yeah.
I mean, the never cry. I mean, that, and never apologize, never ask forgiveness. I mean, my inability to apologize and ask for forgiveness has torpedoed some pretty important relationships in my life.
Yeah. I mean, some of that definitely speaks to not being able to manage your emotions. So it's kind of like how I am with peanut butter. It's like I can't just have like a little bit, right? I have to keep it like out of the house. Otherwise, I'm going to consume the whole thing. And I feel like his approach is kind of like a shotgun approach, almost like, all right, don't, or put up a whole wall, be indifferent to everything, rather than coming from a place where you actually show some emotion, but you're able to manage it and care for it. So you're able to give some value and provide some value at the same time. So
yeah, I feel bad that too much of men's advice that's available in both books and Instagram and Reddit and whatever, it's so much absolutist nonsense and so little nuance. It's just like, okay, you're in a rough position with your relationship or your breakup or your whatever.
Yeah. And
so it's way easier to sell a handy dandy list of 10 things to always do or never do than it is to teach you how to handle your life with nuance. So we're just going to make lists of always do this, never do this, and I'll cash my check and I'll hope it works out for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's one approach to take, and it's not necessarily the approach that we think is most effective. So,
yeah, no, I mean, it's an easier approach in the self-help space than it is to say, okay, you need a decade of therapy and a decade of, 12-step groups, because that's the only way that you're going to get to the bottom of your problems.
Yeah.
And it's hard to sell a product if you're telling people that. So, or a book or a class.
Well, hopefully we're bridging that gap. So we're, kind of taking what we have, the information here, and we're adding a little bit of the fine tuning to say, hey, look, come off this extreme edge of it, and look, there's other ways to kind of take this information and apply it in a way where it is valuable, and you may not need to go through a whole 12-step process. So I feel like that's kind of where we fit in.
Yeah, no, not everybody needs decades of therapy and decades of 12-step. Yeah. Some of us do, and we should do those things when we need them. But I mean, I'll give credit to Coach Corey Wayne, who's all over Instagram, and you can get his book 3% Man. He's very honest when he says, okay, you're going to read this book once, and you're going to implement some of the things I tell you, and your dating life will get better. Your dating goals after you read my book once will be attainable, but not sustainable. And he's like, read this book 10 to 15 times over and over and over again, so that when something comes up that is not written out in black and white in these pages, you'll understand the mindset that I'm trying to teach you, and you'll be able to apply it to the specific situation you're in. And look, it's harder to sell books when you tell people you need to read my book 15 times, but he's still willing to say it. And while I don't agree with him on everything, I appreciate that he's willing to be honest in that way.
Maybe that's a book we need to cover at some point.
Maybe it is. All right, Dan, this has been a long one. We may have to split this one in two. We'll see. And I will talk to you again soon.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.